I've always noticed things that others miss, the subtle curve of a smile, the way someone shifts when they're lying, the tension that hides behind a casual laugh. College life is chaotic, endless lectures, friends who swing between support and drama, and rumors that spread faster than wildfire. Somehow, I navigate it all with balance, observing quietly, keeping my focus on the things that matter. I wasn't looking for drama, but I did want connection, something real, something that stirred more than just a passing glance. That's why, when I first met him, I couldn't ignore the pull I felt. He was the professor's assistant, and from the very first moment, there was something magnetic about him. He carried himself with a casual charm that felt effortless but deliberate. His words were measured, precise, and his smile, God, that smile, seemed to linger just long enough to make me notice. I felt it immediately, the way my attention shifted, drawn to him without me even trying. At first, it was harmless. A casual question here, a laugh there, nothing that suggested anything beyond politeness. But there was an electricity I couldn't shake, a fascination that ran deeper than simple curiosity. Our conversation started small. He asked about my studies, shared stories I wouldn't have expected anyone to care about, complimented me in ways that felt genuine. I caught myself replaying our interactions over and over, memorizing the cadence of his laugh, the subtle inflection in his voice. I analyzed every gesture, every glance that lingered just a second too long. It was intoxicating, the way he could make me feel seen. I wasn't naive, I knew charm could be deliberate, calculated. But I wanted to believe in the connection. I wanted to feel special. And then the small touches began. A hand brushing mine while passing notes, coffee breaks that stretched into hours, private jokes that made the world feel distant. Each moment was ordinary on the surface but carried a weight I couldn't resist. My heart raced in ways I hadn't anticipated. I found myself anticipating these interactions, imagining them, dissecting every smile. Even my friends noticed, the glow I carried, the secret smiles, the distracted air. They teased me, but I deflected, guarding my private world, savoring the thrill on my own terms. But beneath it all, there were inconsistencies I couldn't ignore. A glance diverted when I asked something personal, an evasive answer, moments where his attention seemed elsewhere. I noticed, of course, but desire blurred caution. I rationalized it, everyone has quirks, maybe he was distracted, maybe I was reading too much into nothing. Still, the pull was undeniable. I let myself believe the connection was genuine, even as a small part of me whispered to be careful. The first undeniable spark hit me like lightning. We were in the library, sunlight streaming through the windows, dust floating lazily in the air. He leaned close under the pretense of reviewing notes, his hand brushing mine deliberately, eyes locking with an intensity that stole my breath. I felt a shiver run down my spine, a mix of excitement and caution. And yet, I didn't pull away. I let myself believe. His words were soft, layered with subtle admiration, compliments that felt personal, directed solely at me. In that moment, I allowed myself to imagine the possibilities, the chance that this connection could be something real. From that day, everything changed. Our interactions grew deeper, more intentional. Casual touches lingered, conversation stretched long into the quiet moments of the evening, and laughter became our private language. I found myself thinking about him constantly, imagining scenarios, analyzing his every word and movement. Each interaction became a puzzle I couldn't resist solving. This wasn't just infatuation, it was curiosity, fascination, a craving to understand and be understood by someone who seemed to see me fully. I could feel the shift in myself. I was glowing, distracted, secretly thrilled at every new message, every lingering look. My friends noticed, teasing me relentlessly, trying to figure out what had changed. I deflected, protecting my bubble. I wanted to savor the slow burn, the tension that made every encounter feel like a secret adventure. He seemed aware of the effect he had, maintaining a delicate balance of attention and distance, never revealing too much, never withdrawing completely. That balance made him irresistible. Every word, every glance, every subtle action pulled me closer, leaving me hungering for more. Then came moments that cemented my emotional investment. Invitations to linger after discussions, small confidences shared in hushed tones, walks across the empty campus, ordinary actions that became extraordinary under his gaze. I felt seen in ways I hadn't before, appreciated for intellect, wit, presence. The emotional connection tightened, and I let myself imagine a future where this mattered, where this attraction had substance. The anticipation became a thrill I couldn't resist. And yet, hints of inconsistency lingered. Tiny hesitations, deflections, glimpses of something hidden, it was enough to create doubt. But I couldn't step back. Desire and curiosity outweighed caution. I wanted to trust him, wanted to believe the intensity between us was real. Even as a small voice in my head whispered that something was off, I ignored it, letting myself float in the tension and anticipation. It was intoxicating, and I didn't want to let it go. The culmination of this first stage of our connection arrived subtly. A quiet conversation, laughter that felt like our secret, hands brushing as if by accident. It was simple, yet charged with promise. I felt exhilaration and longing, a sense that this could evolve into something extraordinary. It was a heady mix of excitement and vulnerability, the kind that made my chest tight with hope. I walked away that evening with my heart racing, imagining the possibilities, completely unaware of the hidden currents that would soon change everything. I should have noticed the signs earlier. The hesitation in his answers, the brief glances elsewhere, the fleeting moments when his attention wasn't fully on me, they were all there, subtle but unmistakable. At the time, I ignored them, telling myself that he was just distracted or that I was overthinking. I wanted to believe in us, in the connection I felt, and that desire made me blind. But the truth revealed itself in a way that left no room for doubt. He had been using me. It began with whispers, casual mentions from friends that seemed insignificant until patterns emerged. He was still seeing her, the ex, despite everything he had said to me. The casual meetings, the private messages I had never known about, the way he smiled at her as if rehearsed, it all pointed to one thing. I felt my stomach twist, my chest tighten, and humiliation washed over me. I had fallen for a carefully constructed illusion, believing that what I shared with him was real. Every laugh, every conversation, every brush of a hand had been a manipulation. The heartbreak was immediate and sharp. I replayed all our interactions, realizing how naive I had been, how willingly I had handed pieces of myself over to someone who never intended to protect them. I wondered if anyone else had noticed, if they had seen me being deceived and smiled at my gullibility. The campus that had once seemed full of life now felt suffocating, buzzing with imagined judgment. My confidence, once steady, now felt fractured, and I struggled to reconcile the girl I had been with the woman I realized I had become. Anger soon replaced despair. Once the initial shock faded, a different clarity emerged. I refused to be a victim. I refused to let him have the satisfaction of seeing me break. The humiliation he had intended for me would not define me, instead, it became fuel. A plan began to take shape in my mind, a way to reclaim control, to turn his own arrogance and deceit back on him. The betrayal, painful as it was, ignited a fire I hadn't anticipated. I began observing him differently, no longer enchanted or distracted. I noticed the patterns in his behavior, the way he sought validation, the subtle ways he manipulated attention, the predictable ways he relied on charm to mask insecurity. Every smile, every glance, every carefully measured word became a piece of information, a tool for the strategy one was beginning to craft. Patience became my ally, observation my weapon. I would not act impulsively, I needed precision. The first step was restraint. I maintained the illusion that I was unaware, that his charm still held sway, allowing him to continue believing he controlled me. But inside, I catalogued every detail, analyzed every interaction, and envisioned the moment when the truth would be revealed. Every compliment he had given, every tender gesture, every seemingly intimate conversation had been stored in my mind, ready to be used at the perfect time. My heartbreak had transformed into a strategy, and I embraced the clarity it provided. Subtle manipulation became my next focus. I watched how he reacted to praise, how easily he sought approval, how he expected me to respond in predictable ways. I fed him exactly what he wanted: attention, validation, small signs of engagement, without ever allowing him to sense that I was aware of his game. Each interaction became an opportunity to study him, to reinforce his overconfidence while preparing for his eventual exposure. The thrill of the plan, combined with the control it gave me, was almost intoxicating. Meanwhile, I worked to rebuild myself. I reconnected with friends who were trustworthy, strengthened bonds that had weakened, and cultivated an outward sense of composure. I wanted to appear untouched, confident, and unshaken. The contrast would be devastating when the truth came out. He would be publicly exposed for the manipulator he was, while I remained composed, untouchable, and in control. The precision of that thought energized me. Confirmation came quietly, almost anticlimactically, but it left no room for doubt. Every interaction I had treasured had been calculated to provoke jealousy and amusement, every gesture a tool in his manipulation. The sting of betrayal could have consumed me, but instead it crystallized my purpose. The humiliation he had planned for me would be his. I had been wounded, yes, but I had emerged sharper, more focused, and fully prepared to act. I maintained the facade of ignorance, letting him continue to believe he held the upper hand. Every time he sought my attention, I allowed it, but carefully, deliberately, with purpose. Each word I spoke, every smile I offered, reinforced his sense of control while strengthening my own understanding of him. He had underestimated me, and that miscalculation would be his undoing. My anger and humiliation had evolved into a weapon, precise and deadly in its application. I replayed interactions in my mind, refining my strategy, anticipating reactions, and ensuring that every eventual move would land perfectly. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming power, asserting intelligence, and exposing the consequences of underestimating someone like me. Each day, I grew more patient, more deliberate, and more confident in the plan I had crafted. He would be caught completely off guard. The transformation within me was undeniable. I was no longer the girl who had been naive or vulnerable. I had become someone patient, cunning, and strategic. Heartbreak had sharpened me, betrayal had clarified my focus, and humiliation had taught me precision. I was ready to move forward, to reclaim my agency and orchestrate a reckoning that would leave him unable to recover his ego or reputation. The plan was no longer abstract, it was living, breathing, and poised for execution. Every interaction with him became part of the rehearsal, every smile, every glance, every casual conversation feeding into the strategy one had meticulously developed. I watched him as he unknowingly walked into the trap I had set, each of his predictable moves reinforcing my confidence. He believed he was still in control, that he was the master of perception, unaware that I had turned the tables entirely. The thought of the eventual revelation sent a thrill through me that I could not ignore. By the end of the week, I felt fully prepared. The girl who had once been enthralled by charm and flattery was gone. In her place stood someone patient, strategic, and fully aware of her own power. The betrayal that had once wounded me had forged me into someone capable of orchestrating the perfect revenge. I was calm, deliberate, and ready. Soon, he would discover that underestimating me had consequences he could not escape. I had spent weeks perfecting the facade. Every smile, every laugh, every subtle gesture was calculated. He still believed he controlled me, that I was oblivious to his schemes. But the truth was the opposite, I had flipped the script entirely. His charm, once intoxicating, had become my tool. Every move he made, every word he whispered in confidence, was now fodder for the strategy one had carefully crafted. I allowed him to approach me as he always had, leaning on the belief that I was unaware, still enchanted by his attention. Each compliment, each playful touch, fed his ego, and I let him think he was winning. But with every interaction, I was cataloging, analyzing, and subtly steering the flow. I knew how he reacted to praise, how he craved attention, how easily he could be manipulated when his ego was stroked. I had learned his rhythm, and I was ready to use it against him. Subtlety was everything. I let him think he was in control while I planted seeds of doubt, just enough to make him slightly off balance without realizing it. A casual remark here, a glance there, a tone that suggested interest while concealing true intent, I became a master of suggestion. The thrill of watching him move unknowingly through the trap I had set was intoxicating. His overconfidence was my weapon, and he wielded it perfectly, unaware that each act of charm brought him closer to his downfall. I noticed how he sought validation from others, how he thrived when admired and faltered when ignored. I began to use that subtly, appearing independent, composed, and effortlessly confident in public while allowing him small victories in private. Each interaction reinforced the illusion that he was still the puppeteer, but in reality, the strings were in my hands. The more he tried to impress, the more predictable he became, and the easier it was to anticipate his moves. There was a certain satisfaction in his arrogance. Every smirk, every flirtatious glance, every whispered confidence was a testament to his hubris. I let him lean on it, feeding him just enough to keep him hooked, never revealing that I had already seen through every facade. I could feel the subtle shift in the balance of power. He believed he controlled the game, but I was orchestrating every interaction. Every detail, every nuance, was being stored in my mind for the perfect moment. The turning point came during a lecture-related discussion, where he attempted to impress me with knowledge and charm. I allowed him to continue, nodding, laughing, engaging just enough to encourage him. But beneath the surface, I was calculating. I observed his mannerisms, noted the timing of his gestures, the inflection of his voice. Every small victory he believed he had was being woven into a larger narrative that only I could see. I knew exactly how to orchestrate the ultimate exposure. At the same time, I began to cultivate perception among others. I subtly showed confidence, independence, and intelligence in front of classmates and faculty. Little by little, whispers of admiration and respect reached his ears, and I could see him reacting, sometimes with frustration, sometimes with subtle irritation. His need for attention and validation made him increasingly predictable. The very traits he had used to manipulate me were now his vulnerability. I was patient, letting him continue his dance while I set the stage for his public undoing. Seduction became a tool, but not in the way he expected. I allowed small intimacies, gestures that suggested engagement and interest, drawing him in while reinforcing his belief in his control. Each smile, each subtle touch, each laugh was carefully measured. I wanted him to feel secure, to believe he still had the upper hand. The closer he drew, the more I observed, noting weaknesses and tendencies that would make the eventual reveal both devastating and irreversible. I also sharpened my own presence. I exuded calm confidence, the kind that makes others underestimate what's happening beneath the surface. My interactions were controlled, precise, and unshakable. Even when he tried to charm or manipulate, I remained composed, giving just enough to feed his ego while withholding the full truth. The more he believed he was succeeding, the more satisfying it would be to reveal the depth of his deception. The culmination of weeks of observation and strategy was near. I had built the perfect scenario, public enough for maximum effect, private enough to ensure I remained untouched. The threads of his ego, arrogance, and manipulative charm were all in place, and I was ready to pull them together. The anticipation was exhilarating, almost intoxicating. I could feel it pulsing beneath the surface, the tension of a revelation that would leave him exposed, humiliated, and powerless. I reminded myself to remain patient, to not rush the moment. Timing was everything. I needed him to step fully into the web I had woven, believing he was still in control. Every move, every word, every gesture had been designed to create the perfect moment. The thrill of seeing him caught off guard, realizing too late that he had underestimated me, was already intoxicating. I could almost feel the satisfaction, sharp and precise, waiting to land. In those quiet moments, I reflected on the transformation within myself. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the humiliation, they had forged me into someone stronger, more cunning, and entirely in control. I was no longer the girl who had been naive, enthralled by charm and flattery. I was patient, deliberate, and fully aware of the power I held. Every interaction had been rehearsal, every subtle smile part of the strategy, every whispered word a step closer to his undoing. I knew exactly how the climax would unfold. Public exposure, undeniable evidence, and the perfect blend of revelation and subtlety would leave him reeling. His arrogance would be his downfall, his charm exposed as manipulation, and I would remain composed, untouchable, the architect of his humiliation. The plan was meticulous, and the anticipation sharpened every sense, every thought, every heartbeat. The final moments before the reveal were almost meditative. I maintained calm composure, engaging naturally, letting him believe he still had sway over me. Each glance, each word, each gesture reinforced the illusion. And yet beneath it all, I was ready, poised, and certain. Soon, he would realize that the girl he had underestimated was the one who had orchestrated every step, and the consequences would be devastatingly precise. The moment had finally arrived. Every detail, every calculation, every interaction over the past weeks had been leading to this. I walked into the room calm, composed, radiating the confidence I had cultivated. The assistant still believed he was in control, that his charm and manipulation had won. He had no idea that I was about to dismantle everything he thought he owned. I let him approach, let him lean on the assumption that I was still naive, still enthralled. But I was in command. Every word I spoke, every glance I offered, was measured to maintain his illusion while tightening the trap. I allowed small intimacies, just enough to feed his ego, never letting him sense that I had been orchestrating this moment from the start. Then I struck. Subtle questions, casual references, and carefully timed remarks revealed the truth in increments. Each statement exposed his manipulations to those around us, painting him as the deceiver he truly was. The room shifted. Whispers began to ripple through colleagues and classmates. He faltered, a flicker of panic crossing his face as he realized that his carefully constructed charm had been undone without him noticing. The more he tried to defend himself, the more obvious his deceit became. Evidence I had quietly collected, messages, interactions, patterns of behavior, surfaced naturally in the conversation, undeniable and precise. Every lie, every manipulation, every act of arrogance was now visible to all. He stumbled, attempting explanations, excuses, but it was too late. The truth was vivid, inescapable, and publicly recognized. I watched the shift in perception around us. Those who had once admired him now questioned his integrity. Friends, faculty, and classmates who had once trusted his charm now saw through the facade. And I remained poised, untouched, the calm eye in the storm. The humiliation that had once been mine to endure had been redirected, perfectly proportioned, leaving him exposed and powerless. As the realization hit him, I felt a quiet satisfaction, a calm triumph. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my dignity and asserting my strength. I had turned heartbreak into strategy, betrayal into clarity, humiliation into precision. And now, all of that effort crystallized in this single moment. The assistant, who had thought himself untouchable, was laid bare, a cautionary figure for anyone who underestimated me. I didn't gloat, didn't revel in his panic. My composure spoke louder than words. The contrast was stark, I, confident, elegant, and in control, he, flustered, flailing, and diminished. That was the real power, the quiet, undeniable command of presence, intelligence, and careful preparation. He had underestimated me at every turn, and now the consequences were irreversible. With the room's attention shifting, I stepped away. Not out of arrogance, but from understanding my own power. I no longer needed to participate in his unraveling, the truth had spoken for itself. I walked through the space, composed and radiant, leaving whispers and astonished glances behind. The assistant's downfall was complete, his ego shattered, his manipulations exposed to everyone who had ever witnessed them. The aftermath was even sweeter in its subtlety. He avoided eye contact, his confidence eroded, while I carried myself with a renewed sense of allure and self-assurance. I felt no bitterness, only a quiet clarity. I had endured betrayal and heartbreak, but I had emerged stronger, smarter, and in full control of my destiny. My revenge had been precise, measured, and entirely my own. And in that moment, I understood something vital: strength isn't about retaliation alone. It's about transformation, about taking what hurt you and using it to shape a version of yourself that cannot be undermined. I had taken the humiliation, the heartbreak, the betrayal, and turned it into power. I walked away from him, not just victorious, but entirely unshaken, my confidence radiating, leaving behind only regret in his eyes and admiration, perhaps, in those who watched quietly. The chapter of manipulation had closed. I had fought back, reclaimed my dignity, and in doing so, discovered a part of myself I hadn't known existed. I was no longer defined by his deceit or my past naivety. I was the architect of my own strength, the author of my own story, and nothing he could ever do would change that. If you loved Aria's story of revenge and empowerment, there's so much more waiting for you. Don't miss the next thrilling tale of secrets, betrayal, and triumph. Subscribe now, hit the notification bell, and join us for gripping stories that will keep you hooked, entertained, and coming back for more.